Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name's Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Warrant Officer Kev Close. We warmly welcome the family of Private Thomas John Ellis, whose story will be told shortly. We also welcome the members of the 1st 19th Battalion, Royal New South Wales Regiment Association, who will lay a wreath this evening. We're also pleased to acknowledge Air Commodore Andre Steur, Director Operations, Royal Netherlands Air Force, and the Defence Delegation who are joining us for the ceremony this evening. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony around Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family, visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From Queensland, Ipswich Grammar Primary School, and from Western Australia, Ashdale Secondary College, Darch. Could I ask you to please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Thomas Ellis, who was killed fighting in France in the First World War. Thomas Ellis was born in 1883 and was one of 12 children of Thomas and Ellen Ellis of Murtoa in Victoria. Along with his brothers and sisters, Thomas grew up on a farm along the Murrumbidgee River at Wilbridgie, near Griffith in New South Wales, but was working as an assembler in Sydney on the outbreak of war. We do not know why Thomas decided to enlist in the Australian Imperial Force, but the historical records tell us that he did so at Casula Military Camp in November 1915. He spent a brief period training in Sydney before embarking with the 10th Reinforcements of the 19th Battalion in November 1915, bound for the training camps of Egypt. The Gallipoli campaign had ended while Thomas's troopship was at sea, so spent several months training in Egypt before being deployed to the fighting on the Western Front in May 1916. The 19th Battalion was heavily committed to the fighting at Poitiers throughout July. However, Thomas was fortunate enough to miss out on those battles. He joined the battalion as it rotated out of the front line for rest before returning to the fighting. In September, the 19th Battalion moved into Belgium, where it was rested and recuperated in a reserve position near Ypres after 6 weeks of fighting on the Somme. It returned to France in October, not long before the Battle of the Somme ended, where the battalion took up positions for the winter in the Flers Gueudecourt sector. On 14 November 1916, the 19th Battalion took part in an attack made by the Australian 5th Brigade to capture a German position known as the Maze. Having struggled in the mud to cross no man's land, the 19th Battalion was successful in capturing the Maze, but faced fierce German counterattacks the following day. The battalion made a costly and unsuccessful bayonet charge against the German positions, which ultimately forced them to retire. The attack on the Maze cost the 19th Battalion over 390 casualties, among them Private Thomas Ellis, who had been killed during the fighting, aged 34. Thomas was buried nearby, but in 1925 his remains were reinterred at the Wallen Court British Cemetery, where he rests today. The historical records do not record the impact of Thomas's death on the Ellis family, but we know that they suffered immense hardship as a result of the war. Just 18 months later, after the costly and unsuccessful attack on the Maze, Thomas's younger brother Arthur was killed defending the town of Phillips-Bretton. We can only imagine the grief of the Ellis family experienced after losing 2 siblings to the fighting on the Western Front. Thomas Ellis is listed on the Roll of Honour on your left, along with 60,000 others from the First World War. He is just one of the many stories of courage and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Thomas Ellis and all of those Australians who have given their lives in service of our nation.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them. lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you a very good evening. Thank you.